It is I, Robert Meyer Burnett, just wanting to remind you that tomorrow at 11 a.m., December 5th, we are doing our first live Let's Get Physical Media show. Dieter Bastian, all the way from Saarbrücken, Deutschland, and myself will be live with the Digital Bits' Bill Hunt to discuss the state of physical media. We'll probably, gush all over the new 4K version of Lord of the Rings, too. But tune in tomorrow, 11 a.m. Pacific Time, December 5th, on the Burnettwork, only on YouTube. Well, greetings, imagination connoisseurs. Once again, it is I, your Duke of Dope Discourse, your master of fun and wonder, your viceroy of verisimilitude, of course, your sommelier of sci-fi and cinema, your archbishop of Banterbury, your chancellor of cheerfulness, your pharaoh of physical media, and of course, your existential Mr. Rogers, Robert Meyer Burnett. That's right, Robert Meyer Burnett, and I am here robcasting at you imagination connoisseurs, you members of this, the Post-Geek Singularity community. Boy, I'm all fired up today. Did you ever see that episode of The Mandalorian yet? I mean, come on now. And it got me thinking. It got me thinking about franchise management. And I have to say, I haven't necessarily thought that The Mandalorian has been the greatest show in the world. I've enjoyed it, and it feels like, I don't know, somewhere between a Saturday morning cartoon and a serious HBO drama. Somewhere in the middle. But certainly maybe not the kind of destination television that Game of Thrones was during the Red Wedding or anything like that. However, most of the time that I've watched The Mandalorian, I've had a big smile on my face. I've enjoyed it. It hasn't penetrated my soul the way The Empire Strikes Back might have, but still, for the most part, I've enjoyed it. Now, what I found interesting was there's been a lot of criticism of Season 2, but we watched, episode 6 today? We are 6 episodes into an 8-episode season, and I would say that the quality, it started good. I liked the first episode, going back to Tatooine, chilling with the Sand People, those Tusken Raiders. Maybe not as bad as we once thought they were, but then the season is definitely on the uptick. And if you haven't seen today's episode of The Mandalorian, titled The Tragedy, perhaps you should tune out until you've seen the episode and come back later. For that matter, if you haven't seen this week's episode of Star Trek Discovery, perhaps you might light out and come back later. Anyway, it should be a fun show regardless of anything. So, as I'm watching The Mandalorian, I watched it this morning. It's Mando mornings on Friday. I've got a nice big cup of Joe watching The Mandalorian. And I hadn't read anything about it, didn't really know what was going on in this week's episode. I just knew it was called The Tragedy. And it was relatively short, 31 minutes long. So I figured, little did I know that 31 minutes later, I was smiling like I haven't smiled in, well, I probably smiled last week or something when I got a Blu-ray in the mail or 4K. But I was smiling with my entire soul after watching the episode of The Mandalorian. Now, was it as good as the best episode of Game of Thrones? No. But the whole show, I've realized that The Mandalorian, the way it's designed, again, it always goes back to what I'm banging on about here, which is, of course, authorship. Are they succeeding at doing what they've set out to do? Are the creators of this show succeeding in what they wanted to accomplish? Now, as I always talk about authorship, this show was created by and has been mostly written this season by Jon Favreau. I believe Dave Filoni wrote and directed last week's episode. But it was conceived of, and basically the show creator has been as Jon Favreau. And it was Kathleen Kennedy's suggestion, whether you like Kathleen Kennedy or not. It was her idea to put Dave Filoni and Jon Favreau together. And I would call that producing. And I have been a staunch defender of Kathleen Kennedy's on this show. As many people know, her first full producing credit was 1982's E.T., 38 years ago. Basically, the woman was involved in producing your childhood. Now, a lot of people have said, well, Rob, Kathleen Kennedy's not a creative producer. But a great producer facilitates whatever her or his creative people need to accomplish whatever their goal is. And that, of course, is exactly what Kathleen Kennedy has done for this show, for The Mandalorian. But we're going to talk about all of these things. But I wanted to start with somebody tweeted to me an article that was published on October 31st, 2019, about the economic impact of Star Trek Discovery on Ontario. Now, this is pretty interesting. Star Trek Discovery represents the 4th live-action season under the Secret Hideout banner, Alex Kurtzman's Secret Hideout banner. Now, let's not forget that Alex Kurtzman co-wrote both Star Trek 09 and Star Trek Into Darkness. So basically, the Star Trek franchise has been under the control of Bad Robot / Secret Hideout now since 2007. There's a 13-year reign over Star Trek. Rick Berman's reign over Star Trek was 18 years. So the Berman, although Rick Berman produced 25 seasons of live-action Star Trek and 4 feature films. But still, we're looking at 4 seasons of live-action and 3 feature films. So while the seasons of television aren't there, certainly the amount of money that's spent on the movies has exceeded what Berman spent on his films. But so there's an interesting, I saw this tweeted today, this article, and I wanted to find out the actual, where did this article come from? Where did this information come from? So the Canada Motion Picture Association put out this article on October 31st, 2019, and I'd like to share it with you. Talk about some economics here. Star Trek Discovery on an economic mission for Ontario, spending over $257 million in 2 seasons. Now, let's give them the benefit of the doubt. They had the upfront costs of Star Trek. Star Trek is a very expensive show to make, so any Star Trek show, because they have to build all their sets, create all their costumes, you can't buy stuff off the rack. They have to amortize. It's front loaded. It's heavy in terms of spending, in terms of what the budget of the show. And what you do is, because you have to build all the sets, you amortize the cost of those sets across all of your episodes. I think there was 15 episodes in Discovery's first season. Still, $257 million in Ontario. Now, for the sake of argument, let's just double that. And that's just production costs. But here, Toronto, Ontario, October 31st, 2019. The new data released today examined the economic impact of CBS's Star Trek Discovery on the province of Ontario. In just the first 2 seasons, the production spent more than $257 million and created over 4,199 jobs for local crew and other labor. The analysis by Canadians MNP LLP show that each season of production supported well over 100 Ontario-based businesses from communities across the province. In season 1 alone, the production spent over $145.6 million, including, now this is just spending in Ontario. So you're looking at, if this is the spend, this doesn't include people's, like the producers' salaries or things like that. The production spent over $145.6 million, including more than $81 million on local crew and labor. That's local crew and labor. Over 158 businesses from more than 39 communities across Ontario benefited from over $64.5 million spent on the purchase of goods and services, including catering, hotel rooms, vehicle and equipment rentals, furniture and clothing retailers, cleaning and alterations, storage, audio-video services, and more. CBS Television Studios produces Star Trek Discovery with Toronto-based executive producers John Weber at Take 5 Productions and Frank Siracusa from Whiz Bang Films. And they have the entire report there if you want to read that. Our government is creating a climate that is open for business and open for jobs by lowering taxes and eliminating unnecessary regulations and red tape. Shows like Star Trek Discovery are an important part of the steady growth that our film and television industry continues to experience, and we're proud to welcome them to Ontario to showcase that we offer the world in one province. The thriving film and television industry is a success story helping to make Ontario open for business and open for jobs. Toronto has the infrastructure and talent to attract top-rated programs such as Star Trek Discovery. This economic analysis demonstrates why I am proud to champion our growth screen industry and our city's commitment to working with our industry partners to develop, expand, and diversify both our workforce and our production facilities. It goes on and on and on and on and on. The data released today demonstrates the significant impact a single television production can have on the provincial economy, said Wendy Noss, president, Motion Picture Association of Canada. In just 2 seasons, Star Trek Discovery created all those jobs, and we already said that. So that's a lot of money. That's a lot of money. Now, let's double that. And remember, Picard was shot here in town. It was shot in California. So we can assume then that we're looking at a $500 million spend. And this isn't even all of the money that was spent on the show. This is just local. $257 million. Let's double that. Production costs. So we're over $500 million for 4 seasons of television. And I guarantee you there's a lot more money. Above the line costs, licensing fees, whatever. How much did Secret Hideout make? Post-productions, visual effects costs. I don't know if all the visual effects were done also in Canada and that's part of that money. But let's, for the sake of argument, $500 million. That is a lot of money. As far as television shows go, I don't have all of the stats available to me right now, but that puts Star Trek Discovery as one of the most expensive television series ever produced. Now, the question being, Star Trek Discovery debuted exclusively here in North America, not North America, in the United States, on CBS All Access. It was used to bolster the same way that Voyager was used to start the UPN network. It was supposed to bring in a number of subscribers to CBS All Access. Now, as of August 6th, we have, according to this article that is in Media Play News, according to this, CBS All Access has 16.2 million combined subs along with Showtime. So CBS All Access and Showtime. Viacom CBS was just planning to rebrand CBS All Access into a super service on par with HBO Max, Peacock, and Disney+. August 6th reported its SVOD services on CBS All Access and Showtime reached 16.2 million combined subscribers through the second quarter that ended June 30th. That's up 74% from 9.3 million subs during the previous year. Now, you have to ask yourself, during the streaming wars, it's all about producing content that gets your viewership, get your subscribers up, because what a subscription base does is it tells you how much money you're going to bring in every month. And what you're supposed to do is produce programming that brings in those subscribers. So after a couple of years of Star Trek, 16.2 million subscribers total. Now, The Mandalorian, Disney Plus. The Mandalorian, basically, it has been reported that The Mandalorian costs around $15 million to produce every episode for. Well, Disney Plus has now been around just a little over a year. And I was curious, what is their subscription base up to after a year? 16 million for CBS All Access after 2 years of Star Trek. What's Disney Plus up to? Oh, well, we can see Disney Plus blows past expectations for its first year with 73.7 million subscribers. It's been exactly a year since Disney Plus launched. By the way, this was on November 12th. I guess November 12th was the launch date of Disney. It's been exactly a year since Disney Plus launched, and the streaming service has far outperformed expectations. Disney announced Thursday that its platform surpassed 73 million subscribers. It's remarkable growth considering Disney's goal at its launch was to reach 60 million to 90 million subscribers by 2024. Current projections now, with this kind of growth, have them reaching 200 million subscribers by 2024. Disney announced Thursday its platform surpassed this. It's remarkable growth considering blah, blah, blah. Just a year in, and Disney Plus is quickly creeping up on Netflix, which reported more than 195 million subscribers. I mean, think about that. Netflix, 195 million subscribers, and Disney Plus has 75 million after a year. And a lot of that is due to what? The Mandalorian. Think about it. Does Disney Plus have another show you know about? I mean, they brought Hamilton onto the platform, but for the most part, it's been they've had one behemoth show. Now, we have WandaVision dropping next month, and then, of course, there's more MCU stuff, and they're doing the Obi-Wan series, Cassian Andor. They've announced a Boba Fett series. Can you imagine? It's going to be pretty amazing. So, in terms of economics, has CBS All Access, and we're not even talking, I get people are going to be like, well, Rob, you know that Star Trek is also on Netflix and Amazon around the rest of the world. That is true. And certainly people have helped defray the cost of what is one of the most expensive television shows ever made. So the question is it worth it? Clearly, The Mandalorian is worth it. But is Star Trek Discovery, is it worth it? Now, really, from our perspective, from a viewer perspective, not just a fan perspective, but a viewer, are we getting the same kind of entertainment value from these shows? And I was wondering, what's the difference between the two? As I was beaming with joy today, watching Tamora Morrison as an aged, armorless Boba Fett taking out stormtroopers with his, was it a gaffy stick? Just laying waste to stormtroopers, shattering their armor. It was relentlessly satisfying, I must say. Seeing the Slave One show up, although I have to say, I didn't like, it should have had a little bit more fanfare, the arrival of the Slave One. It should have, that was my biggest criticism of the episode that Robert Rodriguez directed. But of course, we're seeing it from Mando's point of view, so it's not like you couldn't get a hero perspective on it. You could, but it might be, might not be as, it would have been harder to explain. But still, it was still amazing seeing that. I have my Code 3 die-cast Slave One right over there. I should put it behind me so you can see it during every episode. But it was, I was just watching this, and one of the interesting things about the approach that Jon Favreau has taken to The Mandalorian that I very much appreciate is he loves the people that are making The Mandalorian, because it's Filoni and because it's Favreau. They have taken the attitude that, well, the world exists. The Star Wars universe exists. And what they did on the animated show, since Clone Wars and Rebels are canonical, I guess Resistance is canonical too, but the Clone Wars and Rebels did a lot of, you're looking at, there's 11 seasons total between the two shows. There's a lot of world building and lore and characters that were created for those shows that are being touched upon, and I'm sure we're going to see more people touched upon in The Mandalorian. The Mandalorian is a conscious effort to play within the established Star Wars universe and advance it and take the lore further. Now, their attitude is not like,
Well, Star Wars is it's 43 years old, so why don't we let's just change it. Let's give it a visual reboot.
Anyone who loves science fiction, fantasy, and horror, anyone who's a fan of these things, and aren't we all? That's why we're imagination connoisseurs. That's why, after all, you're watching this show. One of the things that attracts us to fictional worlds are the fictional worlds. It's fun to immerse yourself in a world that has lore that you can memorize or understand, that you can pour through, say, the visual encyclopedia of this and look through these things, and you can see that there's a lineage, that there's thought put into the universe. The fact that we've seen the Mandalorians as depicted in the Mandalorian. There's many different kinds of Mandalorians that have different kinds of armor and weapons, and the lore that they're creating, which is an extension of what we've heard about in the Clone Wars and I guess in Rebels as well. And there's a conscious effort to make it work and to have it feel as if it's a part of the universe. And what's really interesting to me is looking at, say, an episode like today, it felt so effortless to me. I just 30 minutes, I felt I was the best I felt all week. We're here locked down further in California, and it was a really satisfying experience. And I counterpoint that experience with the experience I had with Star Trek Discovery, which wasn't so much. I didn't want to scoop my eyeballs out with a teaspoon this week. I just kind of groaned because this week's episode was so bland, and even though it was directed by Jonathan Frakes, and he does try hard, but I realized I watched the episode of Discovery, I kind of remembered the plot points, but really, to me, the story that was being told was sort of a non-story. And the story that I've been following, or the story they're telling about the burn or the galaxy or whatever, it was just, do I care? Did it matter to me? What was going on? I've felt this disconnect, as you know, with Star Trek Discovery the entire time. I don't think I've loathed a piece of televised entertainment more, probably in my life, than what modern Star Trek has become. The 4 seasons, the first season of Picard, the first 2 seasons of Discovery, and the current season of Discovery, and it just got me thinking, what are the differences here? What's going on with the Mandalorian that makes it so much fun, and what makes Star Trek Discovery so not fun? And I think that there is a fundamental, I know when Star Trek Discovery was being developed, I'll give you an example. The Discovery itself, the design of the Discovery, as many people know, originated with Ken Adam, production designer Ken Adam, and Ralph McQuarrie, Star Wars illustrator Ralph McQuarrie, when they were developing the Planet of the Titans Star Trek feature film that Philip Kaufman, who later went on to direct Invasion of the Body Snatchers and The Right Stuff, and who shares story credit with George Lucas on Raiders of the Lost Ark. He also directed The Wanderers and Henry and June, and I think he directed The Unbearable Lightness of Being, didn't he? But anyway, world-class filmmaker. He was developing a Star Trek film before Star Trek Phase 2 and before the motion picture. And they pulled the plug. And his production illustrations of a proposed new Enterprise with that triangular secondary hull, the lower slung nacelles, and the smaller primary hull was a design that went unused, although they did use the study models of those in things like Star Trek 3 and in the ship graveyard in the Best of Both Worlds. So, interestingly enough, the design of the Discovery is canonical of that Discovery that Ralph McQuarrie designed. Now, and Brian Fuller, I thought it was a great choice to actually use that design, because what an interesting bit of Star Trek lore and history that you could also say, nope, look, it's there in the background in Star Trek 3 inside Space Dock, and yep, Wolf 359 there, it's in that wreckage there. So it is a canonical Star Trek design. But when Brian Fuller left Star Trek Discovery, and when Star Trek Discovery, when he left, there were 2 scripts written. The pilot, there were the two-part opening. Brian wrote the first part. Nicholas Meyer wrote the second part, the Battle of the Binary Stars and the Vulcan Hello. And Nicholas Meyer doesn't even get a story credit on the Battle of the Binary Stars now. But he did write the original draft of the script. There were 13 outlines written for all of the episodes of the first season of Discovery. And Brian Fuller obviously wrote for Deep Space Nine. He was a writer-producer on Voyager, loves the franchise. And the design work for Star Trek Discovery, because it was set years before the original series episodes, the design work was really based on the look of Star Trek that we saw in the first pilot, the cage that was repurposed as the menagerie, because you're dealing with that time period. Pike and Spock on the Enterprise and things like that. So there was going to be a conscious effort on the part of Brian Fuller to have canonical fealty to what we had seen back in the 60s. Now, I am incredibly tired of hearing people say,
Well, Rob, we couldn't make something look like it looked in 1966 now, could we?
well, look, they wouldn't do that, but the design work, the lineage of the design work in Star Trek, part of the fun of being a fan, and I know because I've been a fan for a few decades now on this planet, one of the fun things that you have is that universe. There have been technical manuals. There have been blueprints. There have been books on costumes and the art of Star Trek, and you can actually watch and see how all of this has developed. Well, what was really interesting when Brian Fuller left, because CBS, and especially Les Moonves, didn't understand how much a new Star Trek show would actually cost to make, and that the costs are front-heavy, and you make those costs up. Now, with, say, the Berman era of Star Trek, you're making 26 episodes a season. So it was easier to amortize those upfront costs across 26 episodes than it is to amortize them across 10 or 13 or 15 episodes. But making a Star Trek show is a daunting prospect from a monetary standpoint, because you have to create everything. You can't just buy stuff off the rack. And I think that was part of the problem, was the skyrocketing costs or the actual price tag of things. And it was explained to me once that Les Moonves was like,
Well, can't you just...
I shouldn't talk like that for Les Moonves. That's a voice saved for
this is my fellow imagination connoisseur voice.
But the Les Moonveses of it all, he was like, can't you make it like the original Star Trek and just do it cheap? Well, the original Star Trek was never cheap. And this idea that it looks like paper mache rocks or whatever, it was a very expensive show for the time. And it was a very sophisticated and technologically advanced show for what they were doing at the time. Not a lot of people were doing a show like that the way they did it. And it certainly wasn't cheap for the time. But so Star Trek Discovery, when Brian Fuller was summarily let go, even though he does have a consulting credit in the end titles and, of course, co-created the show. So what we lost with Brian Fuller was we gained with a bunch of producers, including Alex Kurtzman, who wasn't there at the very beginning. We gained a bunch of producers, a bunch of people. Everybody wants their pound of flesh. So, Star Trek Discovery has to be one of the most front-heavy or producer-heavy programs ever made as well, comparatively speaking. So there's a lot of money, and there was a lot of changes. So everybody who came on, the people that have worked on Star Trek Discovery, fundamentally wanted to change what it was. Change it all. Change it up. Now, like the sequel trilogy, this Star Trek series owes a lot of its DNA to what Alex Kurtzman and J.J. Abrams started with the Kelvin Universe Star Trek films in 2009. So we do have Star Trek, which is interesting because it is a trilogy of movies. We have Star Trek 09, Star Trek Into Darkness, and Star Trek Beyond. Now, those films, no matter what you want to say, they didn't make a lot of money. Star Trek 09, Star Trek Into Darkness, and especially Star Trek Beyond, which actually lost a great deal of money. Comparatively, how much they cost to make, there was not a huge return on those movies. And ultimately, the Kelvin Universe films were a disappointment. They certainly didn't generate any revenue streams beyond. There was no video games that succeeded. There haven't been any toys that succeeded. So we had 3 movies that were ultimately not as successful as anybody had hoped they would be. So these series, both Discovery and Picard, and now the animated series Lower Decks and the upcoming Prodigy, are basically the new iteration of the Star Trek franchise is not a moneymaker. It's not making the kind of money, and it's certainly not driving the subscriptions that CBS had hoped it would. And why is that? Because Star Trek is a niche franchise. It always has been. I mean, sure, do people like Star Trek? Yes. But do as many people like Star Trek as like Star Wars? No. Star Wars is a much bigger, much more populist, much popular. It's just a much bigger franchise. It has a much bigger fan base. Now, I love both. You know, Star Trek is my jam, but I love Star Wars. As I've told people on the show, I saw Empire Strikes Back 26 times in the theater. Why, yes, I did. And I love Star Wars. To me, it was never either or. It was both. I never understood that. Do you like Star Wars better than you like Star Trek? No. They're totally different. The fact that they take place in space, you know, I mean, that's like saying you're not going to watch L.A. Law or Robbery Homicide Division because they both take place in Los Angeles. You can only like one Los Angeles-based show. It's silly. It's silly. And Star Wars and Star Trek are also very different things from an intellectual and storytelling standpoint. They tickle different parts of your brain. And I think that what's really interesting, though, is when you look at The Mandalorian, which is also coming off of a trilogy of films, the Disney sequel trilogy. And if you think about why was the Disney sequel trilogy made the way it was? Well, it was made because Bob Iger spent over $4 billion of his company's money to acquire the Star Wars franchise, with the idea that it could be exploited across many different platforms, whether it was in the theme parks, whether it was on Disney Plus, and of course in the movies, toys, merchandising, everything that Star Wars has brought for the last 43 years. That's what Bob Iger wanted from Star Wars. But the thing was, Disney had to return that investment. So the 3 movies, the Disney sequel trilogy, they had one thing that they were supposed to do. They had to establish Star Wars as a viable, money-making brand for Disney. That's it. It wasn't like Disney's like, we're going to make the best Star Wars ever. No. Kathleen Kennedy had already been made president of Lucasfilm, and she was there to be the custodian of the franchise, but she also had to appease what Disney was doing, what they wanted. They wanted money. They wanted wealth. They wanted to prove, Bob Iger wanted to prove his gamble to acquire Star Wars, a franchise. Well, he acquired it in, I think it was 2012, right after, so 8 years ago, whatever. He wanted to make sure that his $4 billion plus were not spent in vain. So when they brought Star Wars back in The Force Awakens, they had to make it as broad-based and as appealing as possible to get every demographic to go, because the idea was we have to achieve the same kind of success that we achieved with the original Star Wars. Now, they weren't thinking about it from a Star Wars fan's perspective. They were thinking about it from every audience perspective. Like, we want to be able to get young girls and boys. We want to be able to get teenage kids. We want to be able to get adults, their parents, their grandparents, everybody who grew up with Star Wars. We want them all to come back. So we have to make sure that it's the most familiar that we can make it. We have to go get ourselves a populist filmmaker. And J.J. Abrams, everybody knows him in the business. He's apparently very well liked. I know some people that have said things about him that aren't so flattering. I've never met the man. I don't know him. I really hated the fact that he would go anywhere when he was on the press tour for Star Trek 09, and he would just say always, I never liked Star Wars growing up. It was too intellectual. Go look up the appearance of J.J. Abrams on the Jon Stewart Show, and everything I need to know is right there. So they didn't hire a filmmaker, unlike, say, Jon Favreau, who wanted to make Star Wars, who loved Star Wars, and said, I'm going to go do this. So for Star Trek, we got a guy who said, I don't like Star Trek very much. I was a Star Wars guy. But what he wanted was he saw dollars. He figured, okay, if I can control the Star Trek franchise, it's been around for a long time. If I can control the movies, the TV, the merchandising, because make no mistake, when the deals for Star Trek 09 were made, you think they just made them for films? Of course not. Everybody has an option to make TV shows or whatever. That's what they were thinking. They wanted to make video games, and look what happened to the one video game that was made off Star Trek 09. That's not a cool story, but it's an interesting story to read about. But anyway, so the idea behind Star Wars, or Star Trek, the idea behind it was that Bad Robot would take over this moribund franchise and turn it into a lucrative, money-making entity. That's why it was conceived. Now, Jon Favreau, between The Lion King and between Jungle Book, between his Marvel movies and the piece he has off Avengers and all of that, while everybody's motivation, everybody wants to get paid. Jon Favreau, actually, I knew him a little bit back in the mid-'90s when I worked with Peter Billingsley, because they were all friends. And creativity, and maybe I have stars in my eyes about this, but Jon Favreau did not get involved and make The Mandalorian because his first driving desire was to make more money. He has money. He has a lot of money, and he keeps making more of it. He wanted to make The Mandalorian because he had enough credibility in the industry, certainly with Disney. He's made him enough money. And he wanted to do it. He went to Kathleen Kennedy. It was his idea. He created the show. He's working with Dave Filoni. All of the people that are working on The Mandalorian love Star Wars. The difference with Star Trek Discovery is all of the people that work on that show, with maybe the possible exception of Kirsten Beyer, I think it's Kirsten, who writes great Star Trek novels, but clearly she's been hamstrung, and she is not allowed to exert as much control, obviously, over the show as, say, other people. But the people that got involved in Star Trek, it is a money-making proposition. We can control how many Star Trek shows are we going to make? You're going to see the seeds have been planted in the next two. The following 2 episodes will be planting the seeds for Section 31. That's all I'm going to say. That's all I'm going to say about that. How is George Howe going to get back to it? Well, we'll find out, won't we? But I guarantee you in the next 2 episodes, you will. And boy, and they'll tell you, right? They're going to say, no. We went back to the original Harlan Ellison script where, he was a guy. You just wait. And I can say that because why not? Anyway, and it's going to happen. But the reason, look, the overarching reason for anybody to do anything in Hollywood is to make money. It isn't show friends, it's show business. But in the case of these franchises, the people running Star Trek had no loyalty or fealty to what had come before. They were going to change it and turn it into their own thing. And that is the fundamental difference between what we're seeing between what's going on with Star Trek and what's going on with Star Wars. Now, Mike McMahon, who did Lower Decks, who created the Lower Decks series, I mean, clearly he loves Star Trek. But he loves it in sort of there's, and I'm sure all of you know this, there's different ways to love our favorite franchises. There are, and in my life, I've seen 2 different ways to love things, and neither one are right or wrong. But when it comes to, say, being a creative on one of these shows, we're seeing 2 different approaches, and I think there's nothing more strikingly different than the way we see The Mandalorian approached as we see Lower Decks approached. Now, obviously, Lower Decks, McMahon, he's a funny guy, he's a comedian, and while he loves Star Trek, and you all know this, you might have friends who are wacky people that are funny and all that. It's very difficult to talk to them or watch them or be in the same room when you watch Star Trek or pick a show, I don't care what it is, when they're coming at it from the opposite of taking it seriously. They love it, but they embrace all the goofiness, and they love the tropes and all of that, and they love when Captain Kirk does the flying kick, or when the Amok Time music kicks in, and they love it in sort of a postmodern way. And then there's people like myself who immerse themselves in the universe and the lore. Like, to me, both the Star Wars universe and the Star Trek universe are real things. They're real, living, breathing places that you can go to in your imagination. But when you go to that, it's like when you watch a movie. In your mind, you do not break the fourth wall. You just don't break the fourth wall. Well, Star Trek Lower Decks is all about breaking that fourth wall. It was all wink, wink, nudge, nudge. And some of the storylines were okay, but it was one joke after another. It was a very postmodern way of sort of deconstructing or playing on Star Trek tropes and kind of laughing at Star Trek tropes. And I think that Star Trek and Star Wars, but more so Star Trek, in our current day, there is in our post-Simpsons world, where the Simpsons has made fun of just about everything, whether it's in Futurama, of course. Star Trek now, there's a whole group of people that know Star Trek through parody and through affectionate tongue-in-cheek ribbing, whether it's red shirts or whether it's Captain Kirk being a womanizer, all that stuff. So in a lot of people's minds, they can't get past that funny thing. And I think some of that's true of Star Wars in a way, but I think there's a lot more people that take Star Wars seriously. There isn't really no postmodern. I mean, you can say that about the prequel trilogy. There's a lot of that with the prequel trilogy. You know, sand, it's coarse or whatever. Everybody bags on the prequel trilogy in the same way. But the difference with Star Trek Discovery and Star Trek Picard is that they are made by people that feel that the shows needed to be reinvented, that they needed to be changed, updated, dare I say it, made better. Or let's make it... Star Trek was always about issues. It was always about equality and inclusion. Well, that was part of it. But it was also an action-adventure show through the prism of science fiction in the future and all of that. And it was always fun more than anything else. It was never preachy. It was never certain episodes, Let That Be Your Last Battlefield, like we've talked about. But even the idea of characters who are black on one side and white on the other, even that, while it was a little goofy, everybody understood where it was coming from. But the goofy factor is what sort of saved it from being so didactic and so, heavy-handed. But the difference is with Star Trek now, they've decided that for some inexplicable reason, all Star Trek really is a platform to push a social agenda. Whereas Star Trek was always an action-adventure series first it was socially minded, but it was first and foremost an action-adventure show that was world-building and doing all of these things. Nowadays, Star Trek isn't that. The people that are making Star Trek are changing Star Trek and turning it into something that's more along the lines of what they believe it should be. Whereas Jon Favreau is making a Star Wars show where he's saying, this is the way we all want it to be, and this is the way we know it already is. He's just extending, he's taking all the work that people had done before and adding to it. And yet we still get the Razor Crest. We still get things that are designed to look like the Star Wars universe, the Imperial ships, bringing IG-11 looks like IG-88. We learn about those kinds of droids. They're extending all of that. They're adding to the things that we love, and yet the stories are still set firmly within the Star Wars universe. Yes, do we get to go? Is there a lot of fan service? Certainly. But this season, as it's unfolded, it's given us new characters, whether it's Cara Dune, whether it's Grogu, whether it's the Mandalorian himself, whether it's Cargill, is that Carl Weathers' name? And we've got all these incredible actors, these character actors that they're bringing in, which just adds to the flavor of the show. And there's just two differing philosophies of how to make a show. And one of them honors what came before, and one of them simply changes what came before. And when they do bring in these familiar things, they're changed so much that I mean, honestly, I think that while I get what Patrick Stewart was trying to do with Picard, I think that was a real bastardization of that character, the character of Captain Picard, to the point where, spoiler alert, he died. They recreated him as an android. We already saw from the first season of the original series, What Are Little Girls Made Of? But I think and you have to ask yourself, which one is delivering more bang for the buck? 4 seasons of Star Trek have cost over $500 million, and they haven't even brought in 20 million subscribers to CBS All Access. The Mandalorian, after 2 seasons, 16 episodes, what is 16 times 15? Certainly not $500 million. And they've brought in 73 million subscribers to Disney, and those subscriptions are going up, 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 and up. So economically, you have to ask yourself, has the past 11 years of Star Trek succeeded economically? Even though the sequel trilogy for Star Wars, I think in a way, if you look at the diminishing returns, Star Wars was brought back $2 billion, then Last Jedi $1.3 billion, and then Rise of Skywalker barely made $1 billion. In a way, the trajectory of the Star Wars movies that J.J. Abrams and Bad Robot controlled followed the same trajectory of diminishing returns of his Star Trek movies. And now those same people, the DNA of those Star Trek movies, have continued on in the Star Trek shows, which is ironic. And yet the Star Wars movies are now overseen by somebody who created the MCU, Favreau, and doing Iron Man. So isn't it interesting who's controlling what franchise now, and how the people that are doing The Mandalorian, those are people that already have proven track records where they've taken lore, someone else's lore, whether it's Marvel lore or whatever, and made it all work. And the other franchise, maybe not so much. It's very interesting to see. But when it comes right down to it, if you are working, here's the lesson I think that should be learned. If you are working in a venerable franchise that has been here for a long time, it is always better to work within the established worlds of that franchise, the reason it's stuck around for half a century, rather than try to go in, change, and subvert that same universe and pass it off as something that's the same. You know, if you're working within someone else's franchise, don't retroactively tell us that one of the main characters that we know and love has a sibling we never heard of anything about, and then say that that character that has been beloved for over half a century is the character that he became because of this new character that we'd never heard of before. That is just the height of hubris. Sheer fucking hubris. And when you do that, you're announcing to the world that you're not good enough to create your own things that stand on their own. You have to go back and desecrate things that were made before I'm going to create my new character, and I'm going to go back and change. Let's saddle that character with a learning disability, and let's give that character a sister that they never knew. Let's pick and choose. You know, that was something you chose to do. You didn't have to do that. You could have had a whole new character. You could have said that Michael Burnham, for instance, was a character that Sarek took under his wing after he and Spock had their great rift and Spock went off to Starfleet. I mean, that would have made a lot more sense. I would have bought into that. But instead, nope. The connection that Michael Burnham has with Spock has to diminish Spock to prop her up. And it's just a weird... What's going on there? I've always said the Burnett axiom is never put your universe or your agenda or whatever before your characters or your story. Your characters and your story should inherently embody whatever things, whatever that you want to bring to the audience, whatever points you're making. Don't take your agenda and shove it into your characters and your story, because it never works. It's not good storytelling. That's just the way things have always worked. And that's what we're getting. Every single episode of Star Trek has now become agenda-driven, identity politics, whatever you want to say. It's interfering with the storytelling, and even even the story that they're telling is interfering with the story that they're telling. And whereas the Mandalorian, which one's more enjoyable now? Because they're delivering the universe and the kinds of characters that you want to see in the Mandalorian and in current iterations of Star Trek. They're subverting our characters that we know and love, like Jean-Luc Picard, and then they're giving us new characters that are supposed to supplant everything that came before. And it's just it's comparing and contrasting the two, and it's very interesting. And both, you've got the Bad Robot Secret Hideout connection with both Star Wars and Star Trek, and ultimately both were unsuccessful over the long term, making a lot of money. Whereas the people that are working over on the Mandalorian side, well, Jon Favreau was successful in launching the MCU. He was wildly successful bringing back classic Disney properties like The Jungle Book and Lion King to audiences. And now he's revitalizing Star Wars after what J.J. Abrams did to the franchise with The Rise of Skywalker. So the question that I have now is, when is Star Trek going to find its Kevin Feige or Jon Favreau? It is time. As I call it, the Star Trek hostage crisis is on its 11th year. It needs people that understand the franchise, that care about the franchise, that will bring the same kind of love and affection to Star Trek that everybody on The Mandalorian is bringing to every episode. That's what we need. And that's when franchises become valuable again. The Mandalorian is almost single-handedly responsible. Sure, I understand it's families. Families are always going to want Disney+. But The Mandalorian, one show, 75 million subscribers. And I'm sure by this time next year, it'll be 125 to 50 million subscribers as the MCU jumps into the Disney Plus fray. Well, whatever they're rebranded, whatever CBS All Access is rebranded into with Paramount, maybe they'll have a new regime, somebody else, or better yet, why not start a rival? Here's my idea. Start a rival faction. I mean, you had The Mandalorian was being made at the same time Rise of Skywalker is made. I think what Star Trek needs is a rival faction making Star Trek. That's what I think should happen. Let's see what would happen if somebody did that. And that would be very interesting. But anyway, just my thoughts for the day. I don't know what you guys think. Your mileage may vary. Let's jump into your letters. Omar94 writes in, and Omar94 says, "Hi, Rob, your moderators and the Post-Geek Singularity. I have quite a long letter here, so here goes. This is a follow-up letter to one I wrote earlier saying DC doesn't need a cinematic universe to compete against Marvel since it already has a shared universe in the form of the DC Animated Universe TV shows, starting with Batman the Animated Series and ending with Justice League Unlimited. I'm writing this letter to discuss why that is, but also to discuss its problems, since there are those as well. So here we go. First off, this is just a few personal opinions about what the DC Animated Universe did, which I think would work better for comic book adaptations. The first is the DC Animated Universe was done in television, which I personally consider the better medium to adapt comics because it is serialized, similar to how comics are serialized, which gives the creative team more time for story arcs and character development. There were tie-in comics, video games, and direct-to-video movies, but I will only go into the TV shows and a little bit of the direct-to-video movies. Secondly, it's all done in animation, which I consider better than doing live-action comic book adaptations because of how much special effects and CGI is involved in the live-action movies. You might as well just do the whole thing in animation. Now to why I think the DC animated universe is the MC universe's rival. From 1992 to 2006, under the guidance of people like Bruce Timm, Paul Dini, Alan Burnett, and many others, we had a really solid run of TV shows creating a shared universe. Batman the Animated Series, Superman the Animated Series, The New Batman Adventures, Batman Beyond, Static Shock, Justice League, and Justice League Unlimited. There's also a series called Zeta Project, but that was more of a standalone series, despite a few connections to Batman Beyond. But looking at all those shows, minus Zeta Project, we had a shared universe filled with incredible world building, a rich library of characters which were explored, some great action set pieces, compelling stories, and really well done character development. I found many changes for the characters in the DC animated universe, which were not done in the comics and other adaptations, to be really well done. For example, Mr. Freeze was not a popular character in the comics, but he was given a fresh take in Batman the Animated Series, where he was made to be a really tragic and sympathetic character, starting with the incredible episode Heart of Ice, and his arc continued all the way until Batman Beyond. Bruce Wayne was not the typical unintelligent playboy, but made to be very assertive and intelligent without his Batman identity at risk. Clark Kent was also made more confident and assertive without worrying people know he's Superman, and he wasn't a bumbling fool. I really liked how Brainiac was an AI from Krypton rather than being from Cthulhu like the comics, and how he was the reason nobody believed Jor-El saying Krypton would be destroyed so he could take time to save himself. That fixed what always bothered me in the comics and other adaptations of Superman, and how nobody listens to Jor-El despite him being Krypton's top scientist, as realistically people would listen to him and do as he said if he's the planet's top scientist. Character arcs, motivations, and dynamics were really well done throughout all the shows. In Batman the Animated Series, when Bruce Wayne would either question himself or whether he makes a difference as Batman, or be at conflict with being Batman, the episode I Am the Night demonstrates this when Commissioner Gordon is shot and ends up in a hospital, and it's Gordon who helps Batman see the good he is doing, as well as a reformed criminal Batman runs into at the end of the episode. In the direct-to-video movie Batman the Mask of Phantasm, another example of Bruce Wayne questioning himself as Batman is shown. In flashbacks, he meets and falls in love with Andrea Beaumont, and considers abandoning his path of becoming Batman, as there is a scene where he goes to his parents' graves and says, "I didn't count on being happy." Superman went through great character moments and development from his own series to the Justice League shows. In the final scene of the two-part episode Apocalypse Now, Superman appears at the grave of Dan Turpin, who was killed by Darkseid earlier, and tearfully says goodbye. And, in the end, the world doesn't really need a Superman, just a brave one. And Turpin's gravestone has Earth's Greatest Hero written on it. I'm getting all choked up reading that. In the second-part series finale of Superman the Animated Series, Legacy, Darkseid brainwashes Superman and has him attack Earth. By the end of the episode, after Superman is free of his mind control and confronts Darkseid on Apokolips, most people no longer trust Superman. Starting then, he goes to great lengths to win Earth's trust, which was brought up a few times during the Justice League and Justice League Unlimited series. Static Shock had a great character arc for its protagonist, Virgil, in one episode. In the episode Jimmy, he tells a psychiatrist or therapist about how he regrets not helping a kid named Jimmy who was being bullied and brought a gun to school to confront the bullies. Batman Beyond showed a great character arc for its protagonist, Terry McGinnis, who starts off as a juvenile delinquent but gradually turns into a responsible and caring individual, sometimes coming into conflicts with Bruce Wayne and Barbara Gordon. Superman and Batman would often clash when working together, but both having respect for one another. In the Justice League episode Hereafter, Batman goes to Superman's memorial and says, despite their differences, he had nothing but respect for him. Members of the Justice League would clash with one another, even when they had to work together. The episode Secret Society demonstrated this, where despite there being a mind control subplot, all the characters say what they really mean to one another when arguing. Their morals would be tested, like in the episode Justice Lords, when the heroes become the tyrants after the Flash was killed in an alternate world. The episode would lead to a story arc in Justice League Unlimited involving Cadmus. They also began questioning their roles as heroes during Justice League Unlimited with the Cadmus storyline. In the episode Clash, Shazam confronts the founding members of the Justice League, telling them he quits as he believes they no longer act like heroes. In two later episodes, Flashpoint and Panic in the Sky, the people of Earth also question them as the watchtower the heroes operate from fires an energy blast and destroys a town. While the watchtower was hacked by the bad guys, it was a great character arc for the heroes and the responsibilities they deal with. Other character dynamics were done impeccably. I don't know how the creative team did it, but they did. Throughout the Justice League series, the creative team was able to create a charming, believable, and heartbreaking story between Jon Stewart's Green Lantern and Hawkgirl, Shara Cole. They also created a very compelling character arc for Hawkgirl filled with both betrayal and redemption. In the episode Star-Crossed, it's revealed the Thangarians want to wipe out Earth to defeat their enemies, the Jordanians. Gordanians. When Hawkgirl finds out about this, she realizes they're wrong and tries to stop them. The Thanagarians fail and leave Earth, which leads to a rift between other members of the Justice League trusting Shiera again. She then quits the team and tells John Stewart she loves him. Her arc continues in Justice League Unlimited as she eventually returns to the team, creating conflict among several members. The Thanagarian army returns in one episode, Hunter's Moon, to seek Shiera out for revenge, which shows the guilt and regret she deals with. I know I'm going on as there's so much to say, but I'll stop now, since we would be here forever. While I've been praising the DC animated universe, there's problems with it too. So here are the problems I had. Superman's strength and durability were very inconsistent throughout his own series and the Justice League shows. The creative team mentioned how their interpretation of Superman was based on John Byrne's run, where his strength was toned down. However, episodes are very inconsistent about that, where Superman could get easily taken down by something in certain episodes, but he could handle it in others. The creators admitted to being guilty of this, stating they were unaware of it until fans started bringing it up. By Season 2 of Justice League, the problem was solved as Superman was made more durable to harm. Another problem is the fight scenes. While I think there are really great action set pieces throughout the DC animated universe, the hand-to-hand fight scenes were very simple and underwhelming, with basic kicks and punches. I have a theory for that, which is because it's an animation, as humans, and particularly male humans, are very hard to animate, so my theory is the fight scenes were made to be very simple, as it all made the animators' jobs easier to do. All in all, I really love the DC animated universe, and I think it's the MCU's rival and easily puts the DC EU to shame. In my opinion, even though I like a number of the DC EU movies. The people who made the DC animated universe did better at creating compelling stories and character development in shorter lengths than the movies. 20-minute episodes of Batman the Animated Series, like Perchance to Dream and Heart of Ice, are more compelling than the DC EU movies. Hell, the pilot episode of Justice League Secret Origins puts the live-action Justice League film to shame. In a 60-minute time span, the pilot episode did a better job of introducing the threat, got all the characters' dynamics and had them work together as a team, stop the threat and save the world, and became the Justice League by the end. Much better than the live-action movie did in a 2+ hour time span. Those are my reasons for believing DC does not need a cinematic universe to rival the MCU, as the DC animated universe is the answer. Thanks, and live long and prosper. Well, let me tell you, Omar, to be honest, I think you make a lot of compelling points, but one's animated and one's live action, and people like live action more than they like animation. And I mean, there's just, look, there are people that grow up and they leave animation behind them. And whether that's right or wrong, it's just what people do. And I think you're absolutely right. One of the compelling things about The Mandalorian is you have Dave Filoni, who worked in animation, but worked in Star Wars and has now made the transition to live action. And I think everybody would agree that his episode with bringing Ahsoka Tano, a character he created in animation, much like how Harley Quinn was created on the Batman, the animated series. She's a character that was created in animation that was brought over to live action. I think there's a real case to be made that, like you said, the writers of animation really understood those characters. And I'll tell you something. Part of the problem with all of this is that there is very much a prejudice against people that work in animation and people that work in live action. Just ask anybody who's a member of the Writers Guild of America. And it's unfortunate. I've told a lot of you know that I've been doing a small amount of work on an upcoming animated series for Netflix. Well, one of the interesting things about this animated series for Netflix is that the person that I'm working for, Ashley Miller, who created the series, he wrote Agent Cody Banks, which I was a producer on. He also worked on the Sarah Connor Chronicles, Fringe, Andromeda, Twilight Zone, Black Sails, Lore for Amazon. He also wrote X-Men First Class and Thor, the first Thor movie. He's moved over into animation for a while. And it's very interesting watching somebody bring a live action television and feature sensibility and apply it to an animated series. And I know I'm biased, but I think the results are quite extraordinary. Now, what I find interesting is that look at what Dave Filoni, I mean, I was not impressed with what he was directing the first season of Mandalorian because he hadn't directed before. And now he's getting better. He's trial by fire. He's learning. He's seeing all these other directors come in and work on these episodes, and he's honing his craft. But what Dave Filoni has is a story sense, a Star Wars story sense. You know, if you wanted to work on Star Trek, why don't they bring in people like the Dave Filonis of the world? You know, or the Jon Favreau of the Star Trek universe. It's people that, look, I'm not saying they bring in outside folks that have never worked in television or movies before. I am saying you need a combination of both. Favreau cut his teeth on indie cinema. He wrote Swingers. He starred in Swingers. And then he worked his way up, working on all kinds of different movies. He founded the MCU by directing Iron Man 1 and 2, you know. And now he's worked his way into the Star Wars universe and is bringing the kind of sensibility it desperately needs. And I think things are changing because we're seeing people, whether you love Aquaman or not, what I loved about Aquaman is what James Wan brought to it. I don't know if any other filmmaker would have made Iron Man is the most goofy, most over-the-top, most insane superhero movie we'll probably ever get. Yeah, probably more insane than Doctor Strange and the Multiverse of Madness, because the sheer visionary delight that James Wan brought to the undersea world of Atlantis and all the surrounding realms, that they let him do it was amazing. And that was certainly an auteurist vision, and that was unique. But it would be interesting to see who are they going to find. The more James Gunn making Suicide Squad, I'm sure we're going to get something equally goofy in a different way, but fun, that only James Gunn could have brought. And that's where I think the DC universe is headed, and I think it's great. So, I mean, your point's well taken. The people that are working, we're getting more and more people that love these. The people that love these franchises and understand these franchises are always better off than people that would rather bring their agendas to these franchises and change them into things that they're not. Dean Mikitich is here, and Dean Mikitich says, "Hi, Rob," in the Post-Geek Singularity. Those of you that heard Rob read out my Trek letter and are members of the PGS Facebook group will know I am no fan of current Star Trek. After watching the last Discovery episode, Unification 3, it broke me, and I could not take it anymore, and I posted on the Facebook page my frustration. Is current Star Trek aspirational? No. Does it make you look at things in the world or your own beliefs and make you question them for the better? No. Would you want to live in the world they're portraying? Hell no. I was asked if I hated the shows so much, why do I watch them? Oh, I get this every day. My reply was, well, in the hopes it would get better. As I saw that would never happen with the current people involved with it, it just became to hate watch it. But saying that, there's only so much someone can take before they snap. Watching that last episode, I was so close to snapping with homicidal rage. And I'm not an angry person. I've often heard people say it's best to watch it. It's best to watch it as better than having no. It's best to watch it because it's better than having no Trek at all. Does having some sort of Star Trek better than having no Star Trek? Personally, even if the writing is at the level of some soap opera, which it currently is, and not at the level of Trek when it was at its best, then I'll take no Trek over crappy Trek. So over the last 4 days, I've been thinking about, why should I be continuing to watch it? Well, one, I hope it can still get better, but given the information Rob has let slip about the upcoming two-parter, I know it won't.
Oh, but don't you know, though, we went back to Harlan Ellison's original conception of that character. So isn't that cool?
No, it's postmodern hipster bullshit, just so you know. Two, just to carry on hate watching it, and therefore give them reason to carry on making crap with the Star Trek name slapped on it. So I've come to the conclusion, neither of these are a good reason to continue to watch. Why should my viewing figure from Netflix continue to make Kurtzman and Secret Hideout think they're making something good when they are not? Well, I've often thought, how Star Trek was always saved by a letter writing campaign. I've always wondered if we could start a new letter writing campaign, not some online petition, but an actual anti-Secret Hideout, Bad Robot, Star Trek letter writing campaign. By the way, I'm not advocating we should really do that. I'm joking. I'm floating this idea out there as a joke because I don't think it's worth the effort that it would take to mount a B. Joe Trimble-like letter writing campaign. I think it would be dumb. And people would look at me and go,
Rob, who writes letters anyway? I mean, you want me to put something on paper and put a stamp on it? No, anyway. Rob, I know you're not a fan of people pirating TV shows and films, as it does take money away from those that are making it. I do. If you want to watch a show, even if you want to hate watch it, you should pay for that. If you're not, you're stealing. So, you are, period. I pay for it. I pay for Star Trek Discovery. I pay to watch it through Amazon because it streams better on Amazon than it does on CBS All Access. Rob, I know you're not a fan of people pirating TV shows and films, as it does take money away from those making it, but does current Trek deserve to carry on being funded for the trash they're making? They sure don't for me. I don't know. I'd love to see the economic realities after all the things I shared with you today. The economic realities of making a Star Trek show the way it's currently being made. Is it making money? You know, are they just keeping it going? I mean, are they? If Star Trek ever does go back to being excellent writing and being inspirational again, then I'll happily go back and watch it legally once again. On a side note, Kurtzman has said that Discovery, Picard, and Lower Decks are in the Prime timeline. But is the Prime universe the same one we grew growing up watching Enterprise, the original series, the animated series, Next Gen, DS9, Voyager, and the movies 1 through 10? Given everything we've seen from the 2.5 seasons of Discovery, one of Picard and one of Lower Decks, the answer is simple: no. Just like the Kelvin timeline, the Prime timeline is separate, which I guess makes Trek from pre-2009 the legacy timeline, or the real timeline. The canonical timeline. Why do I say this? Everything we've seen from these current shows have contradicted or twisted things from the legacy or real timeline. The Prime timeline is very similar to the legacy one, but slightly off. I also think it's safe to say that this is the timeline where Spock went back into the past to create the Kelvin timeline. Because let's face it, none of the main powers in the legacy timeline are such idiots that they would not have been able to see when the Romulan sun was going to go into a supernova. Oh no, it's absolutely. Given everything we know and have seen from it, they would have been able to see when a sun would start the process of going into a supernova centuries before it happened. Something we can do now in the real world. Unlike the people portrayed in the Prime timeline, those in the legacy timeline are not fucking morons. So it's a safe bet to say that in the legacy timeline, the Romulan homeworld is still there because Romulan scientists long ago saw their sun was going to go into the supernova cycle and did something about it before it became an issue. Does thinking that the Prime timeline is different to legacy make it easier to watch? Nope. And it still does not deserve to be funded, as it's slowly destroying what Star Trek is. And that is the biggest crime. By the way, I didn't write this letter. Dean Mikitich wrote it. I didn't prompt him, but he and I certainly park our shuttlecrafts in the same shuttle bay. Peace and long life, Dean M. Thanks for writing in, Dean. Always like hearing from you. I agree, sir. Yeah, it's a bunch of gobbledygook. Yeah, I don't know. Let's see what you guys are saying. What are you saying? Is anybody saying anything? I think you are. Let's see. I don't know. I do not know, but we're going to find out. And we're going to find out together. Let's go back and see what... wow, there's a lot of people who've been very loquacious today. Wow, look at all this. Wow. Oh, wow, look who Lynn Hobday is in the chat. First of all, John became a member. Thanks, John. Lynn Hobday, our woman in Japan, our British expat in Japan. Lynn Hobday, who has an incredible voice and is an incredible musician, by the way. Lynn says, "Hi, Rob. It's been a while. It might have been a while, Lynn, but no one has forgotten you, my dear. I was so invested in this episode of The Mandalorian, I was literally screaming into my cushion. It was so good, I can't possibly watch this week's Star Trek Discovery." Oh, yes, you can. Feel my pain, Lynn. Feel it. Feel it. Let's share it together, like Cybok said. I can't stand the disappointment anymore with Star Trek Discovery. I love The Mandalorian's music, casting choices, directors, and much more. It has charm. You know what? That's actually a really astute thing to say. It has charm. It does have charm. You know, who wasn't charmed? I mean, spoiler alert. Whatever Yoda was doing, communing with the Force, whoever he was signaling, Grogu. When Grogu was doing that, it was awesome. You know, and no one could disturb him, not even the Mandalorian and his Beskar armor. And whoever he was talking to, he finished his conversation, by the way. So isn't that fun? Really, I agree. It has charm. You know why? It has charm the way Star Wars has charm. It puts a smile on your face the way Star Wars is supposed to. It makes you feel good. Star Trek Discovery does not make me feel good. I watch it and I'm like, there's been no story this season that has been at all interesting. And by the way, are they going to do a bookend at this season where they finally go revisit that poor dude that's stuck by himself in that office complex that he's been in for 40 years? Like, why the Discovery? Why Michael Burnham didn't make it her business to go and get that guy and bring him to Starfleet headquarters, I will never know. And if they do it at the end of the season, I'm like, bruh, that was a little too late. They should have done that in the beginning. They should have, as soon as Michael Burnham was reunited with the Discovery, they should have said, I've got to go somewhere, a little black alert, and let's go pick that guy up and bring him to Starfleet headquarters. But they haven't done that. That'll probably be an end tag to the season, and then we'll be like, oh, great, they finally went and got him. No, it just seems like they've been a little neglectful. Whatever. Absent Bob Kowal. Well, Bob, you were absent because you were making infestation happen, and if people weren't following your Facebook feeds, my God, what a Halloween party you throw, sir. Amazing. Amazing. Amazing what you made and put up on your house. You must be, I mean, I can't imagine what it's like to be a kid living in your neighborhood. I would live for that, man. Absent Bob Quall says, Mr. B, prediction. Movie houses will be replaced by conglomerate-owned complexes with restaurants, gaming rooms, merchandise stores, and theaters. The theaters will mostly serve as part of a deluxe package for which streaming subscribers have access. Yeah, you know, maybe, but I think the problem with that is they won't have the love and care they deserve to be good movie theaters. And that was unfortunately what AMC was doing. They were bolstering their theaters and making them better. And it's a shame. It's a shame that we're probably going to lose that. Brendan Sheehy says, Rob, I'd love to know your thoughts on Star Trek Into Darkness when a spacecraft with transporters and shuttlecrafts hides at the bottom of the sea on a primitive planet carrying out a mission that feels more like Scooby-Doo than even blockbusters it tries to copy. Look, Star Trek Into Darkness, all of J.J. Abrams, those two movies, I cannot tell you. Star Trek Into Darkness might be the dumbest, most nonsensical science fiction movie ever made. Really. The Enterprise in the water. We can't allow our presence to be known, so somehow we're gonna fly into the water. The idea of starships working, that Federation starships like the Enterprise existing in the gravity well of a planet. You know my thoughts on that. I hate it. Hate it. Hate it. Hate it. Hate it. Hate it. The structure of those ships are such that they're supposed to work in the vacuum of space, not the gravity wells of planets. That shit's the dumbest thing ever. Hated it. Willow, hello, Willow. Out of curiosity, what is your main concern about someone stealing your DNA to make clones of you? Personally, I would be kind of flattered if people think that having more copies of me is a good thing. That's an interesting question. I mean, the bioethics of all that, as everyone knows, I can't get enough of the movie Never Let Me Go, which I think is more so even than The Island. I think Never Let Me Go is the greatest look ever at what having clones would mean. Even though I think at the end, this idea that we have this weird, I mean, I don't know why storytellers think that if you clone people, that the clones are somehow expendable. You know, there's this idea, just because if you have a clone of somebody, it's a different person. It might be an exact genetic duplicate of you, but it's not going to be exactly you. It'll be a totally different person. It won't even be your twin because you didn't grow up together. So Look, if there was something in me, if it was my good looks or my vast intellect, like maybe that's what they want. Ha ha ha. I don't know. Maybe it's just my happy-go-lucky demeanor. I don't know why somebody would want to make copies of me, but yeah, like you, I would be flattered. But I'm not concerned with that. If you want to clone me, go ahead and clone me. More power to you. Perhaps those clones would become more successful financially, and maybe they could, kick me some bucks so I can make another movie or something. Will goes on to say, Boba Fett has millions of clones of himself running around the galaxy, and he seems to be fine. Well, remember, Boba Fett himself is a clone. It's Jango Fett that was cloned. So Boba Fett actually has brothers and sisters running around, or I guess just brothers. But I don't think that's a problem. Let's see. Oh, Script Doctor sent in a super chat and says, remember, Rob, that $257 million is in Canadian currency. So cut 30-odd% for exchange, and that's what it is in USD. Something to consider. That's correct. You're correct. That is true. I should have brought that up, that it's 30% less. So still. But then, you know what? I take that 30% for above-the-line costs, so it all comes out in the wash. There's a lot of producers there, Script Doctor. Like 20. I mean, what I love about Star Trek Discovery Season 3 is my buddy John Ottman, the editor and composer of many movies like The Usual Suspects and Kiss Kiss Bang Bang and Superman Returns, and he's edited all of Bryan Singer's films. So Bryan Singer used John Ottman. They have worked together almost the whole time. John Ottman won an Academy Award for editing Bohemian Rhapsody this past year. Why do you think Star Trek Discovery brought John Ottman in to work on Star Trek Discovery Season 3 as I think it's consulting producer, either consulting or supervising producer? Why would you bring in an Academy Award winning editor and make them a producer on the third season of your show? I leave that up to you to decide. Mr. Tickletrunk, I mean, you can't say his name without smiling. Mr. Tickletrunk sends in a super chat. Hi, Torontonian here. I don't want Star Trek Discovery's blood money. That's hilarious. Stubble McShave sends in a tip and says, do you know how big a part the modern Star Trek production budget that's paid by Netflix and Amazon? I don't. I really don't know. I have no idea. I don't. It'd be interesting to know, Stubble. It'd be interesting to know. Jeff Yerke is here, and when Jeff's here, that means Mrs. Yerke is there too. I don't think anybody loves their wife more than Jeff Yerke loves his wife. Actually, that's not true. I think Claude and Candida love each other that much too. But I do like the fact that Jeff Yerke is a man whose wife is never far from his thoughts. Jeff Yerke says, hi, Rob. Nothing much to say except greetings from Mrs. Y. We're behind on Mando, but just want to say I am sick of identity politics and intersectional feminism. Give me real heroes. The Yerk Man. By the way, speaking of real heroes, I got to give it up for the Critical Drinker. And as a matter of fact, I'm going to put this in. I'm going to find the Critical Drinker on YouTube. And if you don't listen to Critical Drinker, he put out a great video that already has 30. Wow, he put this up on December 2nd, and it's a video that has. Wow, this is awesome. It has half a million views already. It's at 566. Oh, that's his subscribers. It's at 300 of Why We Do Need Heroes, and I just put it in the live chat. Check it out. That's the Critical Drinkers video. I really liked that video a great deal. I thought it was definitely worth sharing. And I think you should all watch it. I put it in the live chat. Frank Tilson has subscribed to the channel. Thanks, Frank. I appreciate that. Dan V. How are you, man? One reference genuinely shocked me in the new episode of Jango Fett Open Seasons. It's great. Well, Dan, I already warned people it was a spoiler episode. I got to look that up. So, as Dan says, look up the plot of Jango Fett Open Seasons. It's great. Alexander Wilson is here. How you doing, Alexander? What does Disney seeking a return on investment have to do with Lucasfilm hitting and letting go of creators, directors, and writers? Gareth Edwards, Lord Miller, Colin Trevorrow, Benioff, and Weiss all left or were let go. They didn't plan it out. Well, you know what? If you look at what Kathleen Kennedy was trying to do, and this is another thing, people have criticized her for this, but she did try and get she went after those people. She went after some great, interesting hires that they ultimately, for whatever reason, didn't work out. And it's tough because she has to appease her corporate overlords first and foremost. And so it didn't work out. I mean, look, I weep. I love Colin Trevorrow's Duel of the Fates script, and if Duel of the Fates was the title of the 9th Skywalker film, what an apropos way to end it all. I mean, Duel of the Fates is what the yin and yang, the Sith, the Jedi, I mean, wouldn't that have been great? You're right about that, but I think she did try. Dan V goes on to say, what makes it even more shocking is that Filoni is involved and changed The Mandalorian so much in the Clone Wars show that it caused Karen Traviss to quit writing Star Trek books. She created most of the lore in the Republic Commando books. I'm impressed. Yeah, I know. What can you do? Mexican Iron Man. Hello, Mexican Iron Man. That's very generous of you. And thank you for that super chat. Today's stream show is fantastic. I saw you on the Loki show. It was great to learn about your life experiences and appreciated your insights. Oh, thank you very much, sir. I appreciate that. That's very nice of you. And thank you for supporting the channel. Dan V. By the way, I loved being on the Loki show yesterday. And I want to thank Purple Valkyrie for even bringing it up and asking me to be on the show. I had a blast on that stream. That stream was great. Dan V. in an out-of-print epic collection called The Menace Revealed Volume 1 as the first story in that collection put out by Marvel after being originally a Dark Horse comic. Oh, that's cool. That's like my friend Kevin Rubio's comic, the Tag and Bink comics. Marvel eventually put it out even though it was a Dark Horse thing. Calvin is here. Calvin Bowles, father to Braxton, sends in a tip and says, if you had to guess, how do you think we will get to see No Time to Die? Will you see it on TV or in the theaters? I think it's almost very likely there will be no theaters to show it in. You know what? I used to think that it was unlikely that it would wind up on a streaming service. I don't know about that now. I don't know about that. I think, well, we'll see. I mean, what happens with Warner Brothers in 2021 and how that's all going to work? It's going to be interesting to see, because you know what? The pandemic, I've been joking, I feel terrible about this, but I've been joking about a pandemic for years. That it's just a matter of time before we're hit with a pandemic. Well, it's just a matter of time before we're hit with another pandemic too. So I don't know. It's going to be interesting to see. Very disheartening though. Natrix 1973 is subscribed to the channel. Thanks, Natrix. And so is Captain Shadow. Angry Trekkie sent in a super chat and says, some people on here think that Orville is that. Orville is, see, to me, the Orville is, Mr. Tickletrunk says the rival faction to Star Trek Discovery is called the Orville. See, I don't see the Orville as being, the Orville is an homage to Star Trek, but it's also its own thing. It's inspired by Star Trek, certainly. It shows a love of Star Trek, absolutely. But it's different. You know, it's different than Star Trek. But I do like the Orville. But yeah, Angry Trekkie and Mr. Tickletrunk, yeah, I think a lot of people do love the Orville. I really do. AJDZ sends in a super chat and says, giving fans what they want instead of subverting their expectations, this is the way. P.S. Rey supplanted Luke instead of succeeding him. The sequel sucked. You make a really good point. What they tried to do with the sequel trilogy was just retell the story of the original trilogy with different updated characters. It's really sort of a carbon copy. They tried to give it some canonical fealty, of course, but they're really trying to tell, that story again. And you can tell the real failure of the sequel trilogy is how the original characters are treated. The demise of Han Solo and the way Luke was ultimately treated was abysmal. And they made this decision at the corporate level that no, we can't base our $4 million investment around middle-aged characters from 40 years ago. That was a total, and I'm sure that was a corporate mandate that Kathleen Kennedy came out and said, this is the way, or Disney said to Kathleen, you can't tell the story of that original trilogy set of characters should have been the first story, and they should have passed the torch, and that the story would have carried on in the next two films. They should have done it that way, and they didn't, which was a big mistake. Big mistake. Justin Toner subscribed to the channel. Thanks, Justin. I appreciate that. What, you weren't subscribed already? Maybe they desubscribed you, because I'll tell you something. In October and November, it was very anomalous. I lost a bunch of subscribers and didn't gain any. It was very strange for the first time in the history of the channel. Richard sends in a tip and says, Rob, when you said that Star Trek should learn from The Mandalorian, I reacted with a deep sense that was an impossibility, and that it's far more likely it will go the route of the comics industry rather than the crowd-pleasing direction where Star Wars is going. You said it yourself. The profit model for Star Trek is not just viable in today's volatile economic and political landscape. Do you really think long-term payoffs like syndication and merchandising will fall anything but flat on today's producers? Look at Hillbilly Elegy, rushed into production one moment, then despised when it reaches theaters. It's all too short-term and getting more and more short-term. Unfortunately, I feel Star Trek will continue in its current format, while the producers and show supporters gaslight you until its final demise, where it will be mercifully forgotten and its murderers will move on to something else to promote their vanity. There is a saying, every country has the government it deserves. And couldn't you argue that we have the Star Trek we deserve? More than anything, I want some kind of great Berman-like callback series, but if I look deep within, I feel it's just an impossibility. A Star Wars version of that feels very differently. Purple Valkyrie became a member. Oh, thank you, dear. Thank you. Appreciate that. Should I not call you dear in this present day and age? I'm just saying that as a figure of speech. You're awesome, and you're a Valkyrie, so if you didn't appreciate anything I said about you, you would just show up riding Pegasus and impale me with your sword. So I bow to you. Evan Gearhart sends in a super chat and says, old Star Trek presented issues in an interesting sci-fi story. New Star Trek shoves them in your face in a sermon. I also feel that new Star Trek is telling a bad story. It's bad storytelling, and it has been since the beginning. If you wrote all of the episodes of Star Trek Discovery as prose in a creative writing class, you would get back papers with notes scrawled all over. If I were a story editor on Star Trek, or if I was a script analyst, I would not recommend any of the Star Trek Discovery scripts. I still don't know what story they're telling, if they're telling a story at all. None of the elements, like nothing in Star Trek Discovery, not one element of that show makes any sense at all from a storytelling standpoint. None of it does. It just doesn't. Nothing tracks, and it drives me bonkers. Olmec Daddy, subscribe to the channel. Thank you, Olmec Daddy. What a cool name. What does Olmec Daddy even mean? I love it. Stubble McShave says, Favreau fulfills both the fan part and the competent filmmaker part of the Venn diagram. Bad Robot and Secret Hideout don't. I agree. I mean, I can't imagine. Jonathan Frakes, God love him. He's a great guy, and he's getting a lot of money to direct those episodes, I'm sure. But when I was watching this week's episode, I'm like, what the fuck is going on? Where's the plot progression here? It's just, and they've got Orion Syndicate crime bosses now. The whole galaxy is devolved into just gobbledygook. We're 1,000 years in the future. Now everyone's like a feudal lord. It's just, it doesn't make any sense at all. It doesn't make any sense. Simon sends in a super chat. Thank you very much, Simon. Came home from work and saw Star Trek Discovery Episode 8. Did you see it? In case I missed your observation. So there's a love shack in the shuttle bay. We don't know any of the bridge crew, but they're really cool with an ensign being promoted. The Love Shack in the Shuttle Bay. Somebody should, maybe the B-52s can come back and Love Shack, baby, Alexander Wilson goes on to say, yeah, I've seen it. And man. Can you imagine? Where's Science Officer Burnham? Science Officer Burnham is in the Love Shack in the Shuttle Bay. Alexander Wilson says, maybe the Star Trek Discovery writing and production team just isn't that good because the incident with Walter Mosley showed me that they can't write complex characters. Also, Viacom CBS's CEO is a big supporter of Kurtzman Trek. He said it was an asset. Yeah, I don't know. Now he's going to do Kurtzman's doing the Clarice Starling show. I don't know, man. I don't understand. What's so funny to me is you look at Star Trek Discovery, and I wonder what's running through the minds of the creative team. This is what I think, like, when they sit in the edit bay and watch these final episodes, do they go, oh my God, that was just awesome. I'm so engrossed. This is amazing. I'm so riveted. I don't know, man. I don't know. Alexander Wilson goes on to say, I was watching Jim Cramer, and he predicted that the movie theater would go the way of the dinosaur back in 2016. He said we live in a stay-at-home economy and recurring payment direct-to-consumer services of the future. He was right. Unfortunately, Alexander, I have to agree 100% with you. I think we do. The world is changing, and it's too bad that that's the way it's going, but I can see that. And I have to tell you something. There's an element to all of this that's not being talked about. And I think that a lot of the reason that people now feel better about being at home, I live in Los Angeles, and we have usually a premium movie-going experience. I would go to the theaters called the ArcLight, which are premium theaters. You pay more money, but they've got a restaurant and a good bar in them. And the people that go to the ArcLight that pay that extra money are very, very respectful. But we live in our society, it's becoming increasingly less civil. And what I mean by civil is that we're being less and less nice to one another. In our social media age, people who go into movie theaters and talk on phones and allow themselves to be interrupted without any, like, look, you take out a phone that lights up in a movie theater. It doesn't matter where in the movie theater you're sitting. It's incredibly distracting. And the fact that people don't turn off their phones when they go into the movie theaters is just maddening to me. And the fact that if I were to say to please be quiet or please don't talk on your phone during the movie that we've all paid to see, like, I have paid to see this movie. I have not paid, but there are people that don't care. And I think that's part of it. I think one of the reasons people won't fight more for the movie-going experience is that the movie-going experience has been diminished. It's been diminished. Tommy Mack. Do you have new shoes, Tommy? Tommy Mack, subscribe to the channel. Tommy Mack is a very good man. You should Loose Shoes. I think that's Steve Martin? To look up Tommy Mack music video. It's one of the great. You know what? I'll do it for you. Let me see. Let me see if it's on YouTube. Nice Shoes. That's what it is. I'm going to put this in the live chat. I don't want to play it because I'll get a copyright strike against me probably. But if you guys want to see one of the greatest imagination connoisseur music videos ever made, look at this video. I'm putting it in the live chat right now. Sorry for those listening on the podcast version of the show. Well, you can look it up. For those listening on the podcast version, look up New Shoes, Tommy Mack Music. New Shoes, Tommy Mack Music. Watch this music video. It is certain to put a smile on your face. Trust me on that. You'll come back to me and go, Rob, you know what? You were right about that. That video was awesome. Alexander Wilson sends in a tip and says, I remember Kathleen Kennedy that said Rey, Finn, and Poe were going to appear in more Star Trek movies during the premiere of The Last Jedi. I think you mean Star Wars movies. They wanted them to be the new Trinity, which didn't happen. Do you think we will ever see those characters again? Probably not, because let me ask you this. Do any of you want to see those characters again? I think that's the answer. I mean, it might be fun if they were really written well, but I have no affinity for Rey, Finn, or Poe. I wish I did. But I don't. So yeah. Yeah. Oboros1 has subscribed to the channel. Thank you. Thank you. Richard says, I saw you didn't react to my essay earlier. Do you feel I made any cogent points? I thought it was a great essay. And either way, great show. Again, it just doesn't get any better from this. It also skipped my Andromeda super chat. Any plans to do more with heel versus babyface as well? Did I miss things? Hang on. Richard says, also, Rob, I'm tired of you saying there's nothing good about Discovery Season 3. It helped Gene Roddenberry's Andromeda have only the second worst execution on that promise ever. On that premise ever. Truth, though, I can't believe this is making me reevaluate Andromeda. You know, my friend, again, Ashley Miller, he worked on Andromeda. I thought there was a lot of good stuff on Andromeda, but it was budgetarily challenged. But that's funny that you're reassessing it. Let me go back to your essay that you wrote. Let's go through it. You said, I'll go through your essay again, Richard. You said, Rob, when you said that Star Trek should learn from the Mandalorian, I reacted with a deep sense that that was an impossibility and that's far more likely it will go the route of the comics industry. Well, I think that the comics industry, there's been a lot of stuff these days. If you look at, there's a comic that's coming out about Coriandar, that's how I always used to say it, from the New Teen Titans, that her character has this daughter and she's kind of this overweight goth chick. And here's what I feel is really interesting. And I think it's something, and it certainly runs through Star Trek Discovery. And I hate it. And I hate what's happening in the comic book industry as well. If you watch the Critical Drinker's very astute video about Heroes that I posted earlier in the chat. By the way, for those listening to the podcast version, the Critical Drinker is a channel on YouTube, and the Critical Drinker does a pretty good in-depth analysis on, well, tropes and storytelling in movies. And the reason it's so good is the Critical Drinker is also an actual novelist himself. He's a great writer and a great story analyst, and he does a really good job. But I think Star Trek was a show about the top 1% of humanity. Not rich, but the top 1% of the most competent, smartest people. You had to be that to be on the final frontier. You had to be. Well, our current culture, it is in vogue to say that everybody is special. And there is somehow, it's problematic to look for excellence. It's problematic to live in a meritocracy now. Everybody's special. Every special snowflake deserves equal treatment under the law, whatever it is. No, it's not. You know, the heroes that we had are whether you're on a Federation starship or whether you're a superhero, you are the best of us. Heroes are people that we aspire to be. Now, I know everyday heroes are possible as well. We've seen that as well. But in science fiction, fantasy, or horror, I don't really want to follow around mediocre people, ordinary people. I want to follow around extraordinary people. People that I can aspire to be, not people that I already am. And I think it's very strange. Look, most human beings, when you think about it, and I mean this with no disrespect to anyone, most human beings are not extraordinary. Most human beings are not memorable. Most human beings are not heroic. And how many people that have ever lived on this planet have you ever heard of? How many people make their mark on history? Very few. There's nothing wrong with that. But entertainment, the things that we watch, should be aspirational in the sense that when you're watching science fiction, fantasy, and horror, maybe you want to be those people. Maybe you want to be those heroic people who fight against the dying of the light, or who fight for intellectual and social and universal freedoms. And this idea that Star Trek Discovery is a ship of people just like us, normal people, people on the spectrum, people in a wheelchair, people that have whatever various problems that they have, and so we can feel like we too can belong on the Enterprise. I think that's wrong-headed and dangerous. I think one of the great things about Star Trek is, if nothing else, it shows us the power of the intellect. If you are smart enough and you work hard enough and you overcome enough, you deserve to be on a Federation starship doing things that are wondrous that only the rest of humanity can dream of. I don't like the fact that Discovery is populated with a bunch of mediocre fucking people. And I don't believe any of them could survive on a starship for any length of time. And that's why I fucking hate that show most of all. I don't want to be any of those people. I don't want to be friends with any of those people. I actively dislike the crew of the Starship Discovery. They're a bunch of fucking assholes. And they're selfish and barely competent. They argue amongst themselves. They're nobody I aspire to be. They're nobody I want to know. And it has nothing to do with politics or anything like that. It has to do with those people would not survive very long on that ship. Under Saru's captaincy? Come on, man. No. So, Richard, I think you make good points about how Hillbilly Elegy was rushed into production and it was despised when it reaches the theater. All of this short-term thinking doesn't help anybody out. I don't think Star Trek's going to continue very long in its current format. I think they're going to roll out or run out their contracts and then it'll all sort of end. And I don't think that we have the Star Trek we deserve. I think this idea, I have a real problem with a society that no longer aspires to be the best it can be. This idea that we're normalizing mediocrity is a problem. That we're normalizing being normal. Because how are we going to succeed? How are we going to survive the things that we have to survive in the coming age? You know, there's this streak of anti-science, anti-intellectualism. Oh, we don't like those elites out there doing whatever. Why don't you? You know, I like that Elon Musk is pushing the boundaries of science and technology. I like that we have people that are going out and doing extraordinary things that no one's ever done before. I don't want to live in a society of normal, everybody's the same, no, we're not. I want to live in a society where I can look up to people and go, those motherfuckers, man, they are making the future. I don't know quite what they're doing, but what they're doing is amazing, and I want to live in a future where I'm excited about the amazing shit other people are doing. I don't want to normalize mediocrity. I want humanity to constantly strive to better ourselves. I don't ever want people to go, you know, you're special. We're all special. No, we're not fucking special. We are not. I mean, there's a lot of people that are never going to be special. They never were special to begin with. And you know what? That's okay. Most of us aren't. And that's why the very special people that do extraordinary things, we should celebrate them. I certainly do. I mean, this whole channel is about celebrating. Oh, wait, let me click out. Let me go wide. This whole channel is about celebrating all of this shit that I love. You know what all this shit is? It's amazing stuff other people that aren't me, other people have made that I love. I will unabashedly say, this room is full of cool shit that other awesome people who are better than I made. And that's okay that they're better than me. And when I say they're better than me because they got all this stuff made. I haven't got enough stuff made. And I encourage everybody to make their own thing. That's why I threw a film festival, which, by the way, I'm just, every time I'm getting new movies in, I'm like, oh my God. I wish I had everybody's films and all their forms, everything filled out so I could just put up all these movies. The one I put up last night, I'm like, wow. I mean, it's extraordinary. And we should all aspire to be better. And Star Trek Discovery is a show that says, you're good enough. Come on board. Join us in the 32nd century. You're okay. No, man. Do better. Do better. Where was I? Who am I looking at now? So Richard, you said, sorry for skipping your chat. You said, do you plan to do any more with heel versus babyface? Yes, we do. We're going to do some fun stuff. I can't believe we did 18 episodes of The Prisoner. It's amazing. I love that guy. He's great. I just wish he didn't live in the UK. But, it's a reason to go over there and go hang with him. I'd love to get drunk with him in a pub. We'd have a great time. We'd probably both end up singing sea shanties or something standing on the table. Alexander Wilson goes on to say, the Regal Megaplex in Washington, D.C.'s Chinatown actually had some way or service that blocked cell signals in the movie auditorium, so I never had a problem with somebody being on their phone during a movie. You know what? That is a beautiful thing. That is a beautiful thing. CJ Laugh 7 subscribed to the channel. Thanks, CJ Laugh. I appreciate that. Mr. Tickletrunk says, not just special, nihilism is in vogue too. It's so great. You get to avoid standing for anything while also feeling smarter than everyone else. Well, you know, as they said in Star Trek 2, as a matter of cosmic history, it's always easier to destroy than to create. I really do feel that one of our biggest problems that we have in the modern age is not enough people are creating things. Even if you have a hobby, I don't care what it is, if you're into horticulture or you're into knitting or you're into making small houses, tiny houses, whatever. I feel that people that make things, I was watching, I had to walk down to the bank before I came on the show. And when I was walking back up, you know, we live in a residential neighborhood down on Colorado Boulevard in Pasadena, where the Pasadena City College is. There's houses and stuff. I actually stopped and watched. There was a guy. I don't know what he was building. It might have been a table or something. He was sanding or putting something together. His dog was out there, and I just kind of stopped. You know, I was wearing my Seahawks mask, so I figured he wouldn't know who I was anyway. So I just was watching. I watched him work for like 5 minutes. You know, and he was like totally into it. And I was just trying to figure out what he was making. His dog was kind of walking around, really cute dog. And I have to say, I just felt inspired watching him make this. You know, when I was a little kid growing up on Mercer Island, our house was at the end of our street. And then there were houses that were being built. And, you know, I don't know if any of you had this experience, but I used to love as a kid to go into houses when they're being built. Like we would play. When the stories were up, you'd climb up in the chimney if you had to get in or whatever. I loved playing in unfinished houses, because I just loved seeing them go up. But I watched this guy like for 5 minutes today, and he didn't really see me. His back was to me, but I just watched him work, and I was like, how cool! He was outside, you know, working on whatever it was he was working on, home improvement or whatever. And it made me feel good to see working on something. It was cool. Ian I has subscribed to the channel. Thank you, Ian I appreciate that. Milton Duffy sends in a super chat and says, the Drinkers video on Heroes is phenomenal. Isn't it? Here's another thing. I'll tell you, you know what I like about YouTube? When somebody like the Critical Drinker, we've talked about doing a stream together for Star Trek The Motion Picture, and I hope we do, because the anniversary of Star Trek The Motion Picture is December 7th. And that's on, is it Monday? Or Tuesday, one of those days. I'd love to do that stream with him. But you know, he's done work. And when he does a video like that, I found his videos inspiring. And I've always liked his videos, but that video is great. The Drinkers video on Heroes is phenomenal. I love your work, Rob. See you on multiple other shows, and I just learned you had your own channel. Well, thank you. Happy to be here. Well, I'm glad you're here, Milton. I appreciate that. And I'm glad that you watched the Drinkers videos, because I think they're really good. And look, he does great analysis of films and storytelling, and he's a very smart, learned man. And he drinks, which endears him to me even more. Angry Trekkie sends in a super chat and says, what's wrong with being normal? I went to a special needs school where I was told that I could not be normal. Why can't someone like myself have that? Well, you can. I'm not saying that you can't. But what I'm saying is that on a starship in the 23rd century, on the final frontier, you better have the very best of the best out there, the top 1%, because you need people that are that capable to take on that kind of danger. I'm certainly not saying I'm normal, but I'm also not on a starship, and I think that's what we need to aspire to be. But you can be normal. Why can't you be normal? Sure you can. But I think that what we need to be is we need to aspire as human beings to be more than that. And I'm saying that you can be the best you that you can be. I'm not asking you to be anything other than who you are. But you have to ask yourself, what is it you want to do with your life? You know, and if you want to be normal, you should be normal. You should be however you want. People should be however they want to be. You shouldn't let anybody tell you how to be. You shouldn't let anybody make you feel bad for whoever you are. But what you should do is you should serve yourself. What is it you want? Ask yourself, what do you want out of life for yourself? Not for anyone else. What do you want for yourself? And then you should go pursue just that. Find out what it is you want, think about it, and go do it. Don't let yourself down. That's all I'm saying. Look, does everybody belong on a Federation starship at the edge of the final frontier? No. I don't know if there was an actual Starfleet Academy, if I would make it through the Academy. But I do know this. Every single person that is alive today can be whatever they want to be. Within reason, they have to understand that they have to understand themselves. What are your gifts? Because everybody has them. Everybody has unique gifts. How are you going to use yours? You don't have to, but how are you going to be the person that you want to be? And that's what people need to find out, and you should pursue it. So there's nothing wrong with being normal. I think what is wrong is to not know who and what you are, and who and what you want. What do you want out of your life? And then what do you want to make? How do you want to make your life for yourself? Because you know what? At the end of the day, that's all we have is our own lives. We can't live our lives for anybody else. I mean, I think that helping people and assisting other people is a good thing, and it makes you feel better also. But more importantly, you got to figure out who and what you are and what it is you want. And I think one of the great things about being alive today is there are people, your friends and family or whoever, there are people, certainly people in this community here at the Post-Geek Singularity, that would help you do what you want to do. And I think a lot of people never figure that out. You know, I keep going back. I've talked about this a lot before, but Yuval Harari's book, Sapiens. I've talked about this before. Yuval Harari is an Israeli historian, and he wrote a book called Sapiens, and then he followed it up with a book called Homo Deus. And in Sapiens, it's basically a 100,000-year history of mankind. And at the end of the book, he takes us up to the present day, and then his second book, Homo Deus, goes into what are we going to do in the future. But at the end of that book, he asks a very important question. He says that we, as a race of people, as the human race, have to ask ourselves this question. What is it that we want? Where do we collectively want to take the human race in the next, 100, 200, 300, 1,000 years, assuming we live that long? What do we want? And he basically, his point is, until we figure that out, we're going to be spinning our wheels as a race. It's kind of like the Hawkins. We'll die, Captain, as a race, to protect what they believe. So I think it's important. So yeah. But by the way, Angry Trekkie, when you ask about being normal, nothing is wrong with what you asked, but I love the fact that you're the Angry Trekkie. You're the Angry Trekkie, which means, God damn it, you and I park our shuttlecrafts in the same shuttle bay, because I'm an Angry Trekkie too. So you're not alone. Lieutenant Commander Salinga says, suggestion for Trek showrunner Tom Hanks, successful producer and writer, Trek fan, space exploration geek, humanist, no cynic, shares Roddenberry's philosophy of core conflict, not between characters, but with characters dealing with issues. Vote Hanks. I would do one better, Commander Salinga. I would say Tom Hanks should star in the next Star Trek movie, and I think that next Star Trek movie should be Eric Judrenson's Star Trek The Beginning script that deals with the opening salvo of the Romulan War. And Tom Hanks should be the head of Starfleet. That's what I would do. Calvin Bowles says, why didn't No Time to Die keep its original release date in October of 2019? Well, you know what? It had a very troubled production. It had starting and stopping issues and injury issues. It just wasn't done. So they had to push it, unfortunately. And it just took a long time to get made. John Orchard sent it in a super chat. Why? Thank you, John Orchard. The reason Star Trek Discovery, new Star Trek, Star Wars, and Picard are written the way they are is because the people who write them are mediocre, which, for the mediocre, can be so off-putting. You know what? I would say that that there is not a lot of great writing ability there. You know, I really wish it was higher. I really do. This has been a rollicking stream, I have to say. The last 2 days have been fun. Thanks to all of you. Mr. Tickletrunk says, destruction is easy. What is built endures. Can you imagine like the the architect of the pyramids? I mean, where's that dude? I mean, he's probably in the pyramids still, but the can you imagine? Like, they built those fucking things, and they're still here 4,000 years later. It always freaks me out when I think about the fact that when Rome was at its height, the pyramids were already 2,000 years old. I mean, I look at that and I'm like, what? There's an example of half the ancient ruins of the world. You look at that stuff and go, where are those people today? I mean, I know there was a lot of slavery happening thousands of years ago. I get it. But the fact that they were able to build that stuff, pretty amazing. Pretty amazing. Alexander Wilson goes on to say, I have many friends who are software engineers and programmers. I'm blown away by the applications they've created. There are a lot of creators out there. Remember, this platform, YouTube, didn't exist in 2004. Oh, I know. And I did, in fact, love what they've done. And there's amazing shit going on all the time. All the time. Great stuff. I mean, can you believe this? These are amazing devices. And this is all created by us. We live in a society that has all of this. Human beings are amazing. They are amazing. And YouTube, yes, it's amazing I'm even talking to you on this platform. Angry Trekkie comes back and says, have you read Rutger Bregman's Humankind? Ooh, I haven't. That sounds good. Rutger Bregman's Humankind. Let's look that up and find out. That sounds like it's right up my alley. Rutger, on the cover of the book, does it say, I've seen things you people wouldn't believe? Rutger, review, there's a review. Humankind, A Hopeful History. All right, I'm into it. Let's see. It was originally published in 2019. Let's read what this book is about. So this is what Angry Trekkie suggests. Humankind, A Hopeful History by Rutger Bregman. It came out on June 2nd, 2020. It's the hardcover. Wow, this is really interesting. And Yuval Harari said, I greatly enjoyed reading Humankind. I trust it will stir a lot of fruitful discussions. Andrew Yang says, Bregman is one of my favorite thinkers. His latest book is simple, powerful, and perceptive. Oh, you know what? You've got me there, son. I can't not get this. I'm going to check out and see what's there. And okay, if it would get there. Why is my internet slow? I guess it's because I'm broadcasting live. Yeah, you know, I'm just going to I should just order that. I think I will. Why not? There you go. Yep. Place that order. There you go. Angry Trekkie, I just ordered that book. Thanks for that. It looks like it's right up my alley. I ordered it. So Angry Trekkie goes on to say, I'm currently definitely into your kind of Star Trek, but I'm currently going through a process of moving on from it. Yeah, I know. I try and move on from Star Trek. I just can't. I can't move on. I wish I could. Maybe I will. Just because it's been with me my whole life. I can't. But hey, I can't wait to read Bregman's Humankind. It sounds like a good book. And if Yuval Harari liked it, you and I park our shuttlecrafts in the same shuttle bay. So anyway, this brings an end to Robservations episode number 569. Tomorrow at 11 a.m., I will be back with Dieter Bastian and the Digital Bits' Bill Hunt for Let's Get Physical Media. It's our first live show, and we're going to be on. It's going to be different. We're still going to have a show next week, but we're just having a live show tomorrow. and it'll be our format won't be there. We're just going to do an interview show, so it's going to be great. And then we're going to also record our show for next week. And there will be a Let's Get Physical Media episode dropping shortly, either tonight or tomorrow. So check it out. Dieter Bastian, all the way from Saarbrücken, Germany, and I will once again take you through a trip of what we were thinking about physical media this week. Anyway, I want to thank you all for being here. I want to thank everybody for your generous contributions, either letters or super chats or tips or DMs or suggestions or whatever. I very much appreciate it. Thank you for subscribing to the channel. Thank you all for becoming members. There's enough members now where, yes, I'm going to put up my drunk Moonraker commentary. I got to shoot a quick intro for it, so I explain what it is. But for all you members out there, I don't know who's going to watch this drunk Moonraker commentary, but it's for you. Anyway, I want to thank my moderating staff. I want to thank the Richard. I want to thank Mike Bodden. I want to thank, of course, Purple Valkyrie was here. Everybody who is part of this channel. It's great to have you. Robert Priso's here today. I don't know who else is here. Who else is here? I don't know. Well, I want to thank all of you and join everybody over on the Post-Geek Singularity Facebook page for watch parties and crazy things like that. And tomorrow night, we will be looking at Oliver Stone's director's cut of Natural Born Killers on Whining About Movies. I don't think there's going to be a Robservations tomorrow because we're going to do a live Let's Get Physical Media, and then we have Whining About Movies tomorrow night. And I'm behind on work, and I got some work I just have to get to and finish it. But I want to thank you all for being here on this stream. We're having a raucous time here on the old Robservations show. And by the way, Robservations is now available as an audio podcast. This show, as a matter of fact, the audio format, the audio version of it will be up wherever you get your podcasts. It will be up probably in a couple of hours. So there you go. Yesterday's episode is up on like Spotify, and it'll be up everywhere else soon. So, and I'm going to be putting up all the shows on in podcast form because people have asked, and I listen. No, you guys are like E.F. Hutton. When you guys talk, I listen. It's been a long time coming. But anyway, remember, every person you meet has a story to tell that you have yet to hear. And all you have to do, actually I was supposed to say listen. Hear, listen. It's always the same thing. All you have to do is listen. And with that, I say to everyone, have a better Friday.